The infamous defeat of the United States in the Vietnam War was the effect of a long, costly, and divisive proxy conflict of the Cold War over communism with North Vietnam, supported by Soviet Russia and China, against South Vietnam, with its principal ally United States, and the support of anti-communist alliances. The Viet Cong were the guerrilla force that, with the support of the North Vietnamese Army, fought against South Vietnam and its allies. Contrary to popular belief, neither the North Vietnamese Army nor Viet Cong guerrillas could match the US forces in skill or firepower during the Vietnam War. What they could do is hamper the Americans' ability to advance or pursue them in a retreat. The determination of the Viet Cong was exceptional. They were on home ground and utilized their surroundings to their advantage when it came to creating and laying ingenious booby traps. The Vietnamese booby traps were cheap and relatively simple to make, and the Viet Cong used them to a devastating effect. Unlike mines, most of the booby traps laid were made from bamboo, which could not register on mine detectors, and often worked on their own, meaning traps could be set ahead of time, and the Viet Cong could abandon the region altogether while still inflicting casualties on the Americans. The ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The skillful leader subdues the enemy army without any fighting." According to a Marine Corps report, 70% of all US casualties in the first few months of 1965 resulted from mines and booby traps. These disastrous traps were designed in a way to maim and not to kill. This meant the other soldiers were required to remove their wounded colleagues, which hampered operations and slowed down the advance of the US forces. The situation was made worse with a line of secondary traps targeting the relief forces and support lines. It's estimated that throughout the Vietnam War, approximately 11% of deaths and 15% of wounds to American soldiers were caused by booby traps and mines. Punji sticks, also known as Punji stakes, were the most infamous of the booby traps used by the Viet Cong, said to account for 2% of all wounds to American soldiers. They were mostly made out of bamboo or sometimes of metal and had a simple sharpened spike on one end to impale its victim. The sharpened stakes were often coated in feces or urine, with the aim of causing an infection in their victim. They were also sometimes coated with poisonous substances from animals and plants. The sticks were often jammed together into pits dug in areas likely to be passed through by American troops and camouflaged with flimsy coverlets topped with dirt or grass. When an American soldier broke through the flimsy cover over the hole, they would step on the spikes at the bottom and suffer injuries to their feet and legs. Additional hidden stakes were also installed at a downward angle along the sides of the hole. When these extra stakes were added, it became difficult for the victim to get themselves out without causing themselves injuries. This often resulted in the slowing down of their unit while efforts were made to free them, and also allowed Viet Cong with opportunities to trap them in an ambush. If the Viet Cong engaged American forces in a sudden gunfight, an unsuspecting soldier might dive into the grass for cover and be impaled by the hidden trap. The Viet Cong was also known to place Punji sticks under bridges beneath false planks, so an American scout on patrol would suddenly crash through the bridge and fall into a pit of spikes. Bamboo whips were another brutal booby trap notoriously employed by the Viet Cong against patrols in the thickets of the Vietnamese jungles. These traps were crafted from springy green bamboo sticks, usually between 3 and 10 feet in length. The sticks were attached to a tripwire and pulled back with a lot of tension. On the end of the stick, they affixed a number of foot-long spikes, which was then rigged to a tree along a footpath and cocked back like a horizontal catapult. When the device was triggered, the spiked end of the pole would whip around and strike whoever was in its path, often impaling the victim in their legs or torso The sticks were attached to a tripwire and pulled back with a lot of tension. On the end of the stick, they affixed a number of foot-long spikes, which was then rigged to a tree along a footpath and cocked back like a horizontal catapult. When the device was triggered, the spiked end of the pole would whip around and strike whoever was in its path, often impaling the victim in their legs or torso at a speed of 100 miles per hour. The Cartridge trap was one of the most simple yet deadly traps due to the difficulty of detecting such a small contraption. In a small hole on the path, an ammunition round would be set within a tube made from bamboo, with a nail and wooden board placed underneath to act as a mock-firing pin. Camouflage was then placed over top to prevent enemy soldiers from detecting it in advance. When they stepped on the booby trap, the soldier's weight would activate the ammunition and fire it through their foot. These traps were often called toe poppers. Smaller cartridges often left men permanently disabled, while larger shells were fatal. The shot fired would also lead to confusion among the forces and led to a constant fear at every step. Snake pits were commonly used throughout the Viet Cong's campsites and tunnel systems. A poisonous snake would be attached to a piece of bamboo, and when released would place the serpent in the perfect location to attack. Snake pits were encountered frequently by American sappers and tunnelers. Bamboo pit vipers were a common snake used by the Viet Cong. Within a few minutes of being bitten, the flesh surrounding the bite turned necrotic, swollen, and was an extremely painful affair. Snakes were also used by the Viet Cong tied up and hidden in supply storages, weapons caches and soldiers' packs, so that any American that tries to loot their supplies gets attacked by the snake. The vipers were also nefariously tied up by their tails on the branches of trees in the jungles among vines, so that they came up to face height, and would attack the heads of any passing American troops. The Viet Cong traps were ingeniously created to damage American support forces and utilized delaying tactics. American forces commonly used Huey helicopters to insert troops into battle and evacuate casualties. The Viet Cong developed countermeasures to attack helicopters while they attempted to land. It involved mounting grenades, mortar rounds, and other explosive devices on trees along the surface of the landing zone. These booby traps were set off when the helicopter hit a tripwire strung between loosely placed poles on the ground. Young Vietnamese boys were once forced to place hand grenades at various landing zones. The Viet Cong instructed the boys to wrap the grenades' levers with string and place pieces of paper attached to the ends. When a helicopter came in to land, the helicopter's rotor wash would blow the paper, unwrap the string, and detonate the booby trap, ruining American support lines. Only a living man tells the tale. The Vietnam War was infamous for the guerrilla warfare the American forces were largely unprepared for. In 1983, among Vietnam veterans, approximately 15% of men and 9% of women were found to have post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, from the effects of the terror imposed by the Viet Cong's guerrilla tactics. The deadly traps set by the Vietnamese turned into an effective psychological weapon, as the men who survived these traps would spread fear and terror throughout the forces, which would stay with the army veterans for the rest of their lives. The American forces were in constant fear at every step of their campaign for the unpredictability of the booby traps. Stay tuned to find out more about the dark side of warfare in history. Reliving the military strategy and tactics through history, this is Time Capsule. Please like, subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out. Thank you for watching. See you again next time on Time Capsule.